It is the grass court season, meaning that my guest is probably having a lot of fun right now. Although, knowing her job, she probably has fun all year long. It is Chloe Collins. She is junior production manager and commentary manager for WTA Media. She joins me on the On to Something podcast, a sports media podcast that learns about the backstories of those in our industry as if to shine light on what the human sides of people are, along with what they're doing in the working world. I'm Bryan Fenley, a tennis broadcaster. And Chloe, thanks so much for being a part of this. I know I've had some of your colleagues on as well, so thanks for stepping in as well for this story. This is going to be great.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian. Yeah, it's great to be a part of this and to just hear other people's stories as well as being able to tell my own. It's really fascinating. Thanks for having me.
What is fascinating is the fact that you're traveling all over the world. How do you feel like tennis has allowed you to see the world and teach you about life in ways that you never previously expected?
Oh wow, yeah. This I think this is like the biggest aspect of my job. It's certainly one of the biggest aspects for my friends and family when I say to them what I do. And I think with the traveling, I've been to places that I just never would have gone to if I hadn't done this job and if I hadn't been involved in tennis. Admittedly, places I hadn't even heard of as well. And I think it just really it expands your world so much because you're kind of forced to step up as well and go to places that you would think to yourself, oh, maybe not if it's about holidays, but when it's about work, you're going all the way to the other side of the world. And not only that, you're working there and you're interacting on a whole different level with the people who live and work there because you're having to not be a holidaymaker, but actually, work and get a product built and out there in the world. And it's fantastic for my confidence levels personally. It's shot them right up into the stratosphere. But it's great to just meet so many other people all across the world, and we all have that one thing in common, which is tennis and getting tennis out there in the international community. And it's amazing how many friends you make from that, how many things you learn. Yeah, it's constantly growing, constantly, and you don't get bored of it. Even if you're going back to the same places, you still don't get bored of it because there's always something new to see and learn and do.
When you're at these new places, what do you do to make sure that obviously you have a job to do, but there's also a little bit of time for when you can take in the moment? What are the things that you like to do to make sure you really experience the here and the now, aside from all the work you'll be doing at certain sites?
Yeah, it's challenging because tennis is obviously a sport that is, there's no time limit essentially. So you can be all day, every day focused on the work. So it is really important to try and take the time, and even the little things where you're maybe just heading down to the local store to buy some snacks for the crew or something like that is so important because you're actually immersing yourself in that world that's outside of the tennis bubble. And it very much does become the bubble of just being on site and being with the tennis players and with the tennis community and with the crew who are doing the broadcasting. But when you get outside of that, you're reminded of the fact there is a world out there, and you're seeing it, you're being there for a few days of it. So yeah, I mean, it's just the little things. I like to just kind of, if I can, just step outside of either the hotel or the site and just go for a walk. It's as simple as that. It doesn't have to be anything more involved, but just walking around somewhere that's completely new and different. And you can feel like, yeah, I've actually been in the place rather than just, oh, I arrived here, but I didn't see any of it because I was too busy working.
Zooming out to what you were just saying, I feel like a common trend here in a theme is that this allows you to step outside of your comfort zone and to be able to harness that. How has not only tennis and travel, but even going beyond just those things in your life, how have you tried to really challenge yourself and step outside of your comfort zone in the ways in which you like to do that?
It's difficult to quantify in words, but you know, I I was always I still am technically a very introverted person, and very much keep myself to myself. But you want to be able to push those boundaries a little bit more in your life as much as possible, and your job gives you a really good platform to be able to do that. And I think for me, for this, I started this project as somebody who was always just a little bit unsure of herself and a little bit unsure of how she was coming across to people when she was communicating with them, and didn't want to rock any boats or cause any issues or anything like that. I still don't want to cause any issues, but sometimes now you realize you have to rock a few boats because that's how you get the job done to the level that you need it to be done. And that's how you get your voice to be heard a little bit more at the time when it needs to be. And I think even just the day to day of, I mean, just the experience of having to get yourself physically from one side of the world to another, and you're having to deal with all those travel situations, and there's a lot of other people around you trying to do the same thing, and you're just trying to get yourself from A to B. It's quite terrifying when you start doing it and you're either doing it for yourself, or in my position, I'm responsible for other people doing it as well. So, I'm checking to make sure those people are getting from A to B and they're getting there safely. And that puts a lot on you, but also really just kind of forces you to go, okay, I've just got to do it now. I've just got to step up and get it done. There's no one else who's going to do that but me. And once you get into that stream, I suppose, of I've just got to get it done, the pressure kind of falls off a little bit because you haven't got a choice at that point, and you just get used to it, and it becomes easier each time you do it as well.
How much is it for you getting used to, and how much have you gotten used to really knowing your voice, understanding its power, and seeing what it's capable of, as you've so eloquently described stages of your life to where you've had to step in and interject and take on that assertive role to really find your voice. How confidence boosting is that to get into that stage that you are now?
It's actually really powerful, and to be honest with you, I'm still finding it. I'm still realizing that I have that capability, and I think certainly from the commentary management aspect that I have as well, because that sort of is is just me for WTA Media effectively. So you have that responsibility on your shoulders that you're the main person dealing with this, but then you sort of realize after however many years of doing it that you have built up a rapport and also a level of respect that you almost don't realize is there. And then suddenly you realize, oh, actually, I'm in this position now and it's a position of responsibility, and I've got to do my best in that, and I've got to take that seriously, and I've got to respect that. But also I have actually managed to build that up for myself, and I can be proud of that as well. So yeah, I think it still doesn't almost seem real to me to a certain extent, because in my head, I don't know if this is true of everybody, but I think in your head, you're always still that kind of like awkward 16-year-old that you always were, and you're still trying to build up on that. But at some point, you kind of get to the, oh, okay, yeah, I've reached this stage, and I've done that on my own, and I've actually really achieved something for myself. And I have all these amazing people around me that have supported me in that and have helped me to build that up. So I think it's nice if you have a space of time as well that you can really look back over and see the different timelines, the different kind of markers that you made throughout that space as well. Of like, oh, I managed to develop from point A through point B and C and all the way to point kind of D and E at the end of it. It's nice to have that to look back on as well and realize the difference.
Yeah, good on you to have that awareness to see how even your relationship with yourself and how the self-respect you have for yourself has only gotten more and more as you've built up this experience, especially with what you're doing in the working world. What was your childhood like? You're talking about a snapshot of you at 16. What was that like growing up for you?
I mean, it was fine. I think, like I say, I was always massively introverted, and I was always the super sensible, like never did anything wrong, never pushed any boundaries. I was way too much of a goody two shoes. Some people would probably argue I still am, and I'm sure that's true. But yeah, I was very much kind of that. So it was, it was always a very I'd probably argue it was a very clean, in inverted commas, childhood. I wasn't one of those messy kids who was always going around like climbing trees and getting, dirt and paint or whatever all over themselves. I was very much everything was clean and tidy and everything in its place, which has continued on into adulthood. But you don't necessarily expect that with kids. But yeah, that was very much me, and I was always pretty quiet as a kid, and very sort of, I would entertain myself quite happily with just reading books or playing with my own toys or whatever. So yeah, it was quite a sort of an encapsulated childhood of just sort of me myself, and I was happy with that. That wasn't an issue. There were other kids around, but I just never sort of I never felt like I was always quite on the same wavelength as other kids, because they all wanted to go off and do something riotous and messy, and I'm kind of there like, no, I'll just be myself in a little corner over here, and I'm quite happy with that. So yeah, it's to then sort of go into adulthood, and you can't just be by yourself. Obviously, you've got to be part of a team. You've got to be part of something, and you have to sort of find your place in that. And you've still got the people who want to be messy and rowdy and do whatever on one side, but that's fine, because you kind of, I don't know. It's easier as an adult to sort of, I think, find your own place within that and feel happy with it for yourself. Whereas when you're a kid, everyone's kind of judging you a little bit more for that, especially as you're a teenager growing up. It's kind of like, peer pressure to be part of the crowd and whatever. Yeah.
Isn't part of it though that even as we get older, there always is that longing, at least I don't want to speak for you, but for me, where I do enjoy, like, if I can, let's say that, I'm nostalgic of some of the childhood years where the things I was into, the adventurous nature that I took on things. And I try to keep some of that within me, even as an adult. If you could, and if you would, what part of you do you feel like, yeah, I still kind of like to tap into that younger side, even though you're growing up now?
Um, oh my God, that's a difficult question. I feel like I'm more adventurous as an adult than I ever was as a kid, so it's really difficult. I think, I don't know. I think as a kid, just the kind of things that you still maybe tap into is maybe just some of the childish joy of certain things that, you sometimes you still look at it in the same way as a kid than you might do as an adult. And I guess, I don't know, I was a massive, massive Disney fan when I was a kid, like super, super massive fan of Disney. I still am, but in a different way, I suppose. But I think there's still that kind of element of, you can watch a Disney film now, for instance, maybe one of the newer ones that's come out, but you're never going to have watched it as a child because it came out when you were an adult. Whereas if you go back and watch the ones that you watched as a kid, you kind of feel like you are a kid again, because you have all these memories and experiences of watching it as a kid, and that kind of takes you back, I suppose, to just sort of how, when you were a kid, it was all so much simpler, and how you kind of looked at it differently to how you would look at it now. And I think that's probably the biggest example for me of the difference between being a kid and being an adult. And if you have those movies, you take the ones you watched when you were a kid, you're still kind of watching them as if you were a kid. Whereas you take the ones that came out when you're an adult, you're seeing them in a whole different way, because you didn't view them as a kid. So yeah, that's kind of the dividing line for me, I suppose.
What parallels could you find in Disney movies and in watching tennis, in that there is this love of this fun-loving, whimsical like nature to tennis, and the storytelling aspect as well, that you could see some correlations between the storytelling, the love of Disney, and how that actually, the plots and the storylines, the underlying messages that might come across as well, say in a tennis match too.
Yeah, definitely. I think Disney, as well as many, many other sorts of storytelling aspects, they've got sort of resilience in them. They've got the idea of, you could start down at the bottom, and you can just, work your way up to the top, because if you've got that resilience and you've got that belief in yourself, and that's a huge part of the Disney core, isn't it? It's about belief. It's about, really believing in yourself and pushing yourself as much as you possibly can. And that resonates with tennis because you watch these players and, I just don't even know how any of them do it. They are superhuman in my mind to achieve what they achieve. And it's that kind of idea of resilience and belief, and also being able to um, not take yourself too seriously, and be aware of everyone else that's around you and kind of how it all comes together. When the players win their tournaments, and then they make the effort to say thank you to everybody else that's been part of that tournament, and that's reminding us that it's everybody that's involved in this, put together. And again, I guess that relates to a Disney film in terms of you've got the hero or the heroine, but you've also got, the comic relief, and you've also got the villain also has to play their part and all that kind of thing. And you've got the location as well. And location is super important to tennis because that's, a huge driving part. We could just play the same tournament over and over, week after week, in the same place. It wouldn't necessarily be different, but it would be different because the location and the fans and everything that comes from, whether it's in Osaka or whether it's in New York or anywhere in between, makes a difference. So you've got all of those aspects put together, I think, which you could relate to both sort of cinema and also tennis as well.
What's the best feedback, the most appreciated feedback that you can receive coming off a broadcast that you'd like to hear or that you hope to hear?
Um, just anything that's kind of saying, I mean, feedback of a broadcast is anything that's just positive about, like, oh, it looked great, it sounded great. But I think for me, the feedback that resonates more for me is actually kind of feedback that comes off any of the crew that I'm dealing with, any of the commentators that I'm dealing with, that come to me personally and say, thanks so much for your help on that one. Thanks so much for being flexible. Thanks so much for understanding. Thanks so much for listening to what I had to say and, trying to do your best to help out on that. And I feel that resonates with me more because of the fact that that is me having done something to help somebody else out. The broadcasting thing is great if we get amazing feedback on it, but that reflects on all of us, and which is fantastic because it should do, because it's the whole team coming together, and that's a job well done. But I think the feedback that resonates with me more is if somebody's actually coming to me and saying, can you help me out here with XYZ, so that I can make this work for you, and I can come back and say, yeah, absolutely, if we do this, then this should work out, and we just change it ever so slightly. And just having that element of flexibility that people appreciate, I think is kind of worth it more for me.
You've come through, you've been clutch in terms of being supportive of your coworkers. When have you noticed that you've most benefited from somebody else giving you a helping hand, where you've done so much for others, but where a helping hand from somebody else was cherished and something you'll always remember?
Yeah, that for me would be a colleague of mine. She doesn't actually work on our team anymore. She's gone on to bigger and better things, but she was my line manager when I first started out. And like I say, when I first started, I was, awkward, lacking confidence, introverted, more so than I am now. And she was just the best person at bringing out whatever it was that she saw in me. She was part of the hiring process for me on the team, and then she took on the management of my day to day and my development. And she was just so superb at that. And I will never forget the fact that I emailed her, and this was in COVID time, so we were all feeling a little bit down anyway, but I emailed her with my kind of, right, for the next coming year, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to achieve. And her response to that was just so uplifting and so heartwarming. It was just a full on, I think she just started out her response with saying, this has made me so happy with what I've just read that you've just given me. And that, that was just so inspiring for me because she was so determined to help me be better at being myself, at being, in my job, every aspect. And that has really resonated with me. And yes, she no longer works as part of our team, but we're still really close friends. And I think that just will always stick with me because of the fact that she gave me that extra lift to kind of believe in myself and um, push myself onto that extra level that I was able to get to and maintain simply because she was there in my corner.
She empowered you. Obviously, you're empowering a lot of people in what you're doing right now. And to further get into to your true self, I feel like this is a really cool story for you because, and we're all going through it, is this like this journey of self-discovery. Like we were this when we were younger, but through the help of others, through our work, through trial and error, we become, as we get older, more comfortable in who we are. And as you look into the future, what more does that look like? What does your truest self look like as you continue to build on the success and the progress that you've already made?
Oh wow. I had a really funny conversation the other day actually with a friend of mine. We were talking about like when we got old and everything and being able to have that freedom that older people have of just being able to do whatever you want and say whatever you want and all that kind of thing. But I think I think for me it's it's just kind of pushing on with what I've already achieved and just allowing myself to not forget the fact that I have, made this progress and done all of these things that, I never imagined that I was going to do. The traveling that I've done, sometimes you just you just stand inside one of these tennis tournaments, when it's not quite happening or it's ready to go or you're waiting for it to come on. And I think I had one where it hit me once at one of the finals that I was at, and I just kind of stood there and I was just like, wow, I'm here and I'm doing this. And I think as you keep going and you get older and whatever, I think you need to kind of block that moment in your head, and you have to keep it as sort of like a virtual photograph, if you like, in your mind to go back to. That every time you go to do something new, to transition into something else, or whatever it is that you might do, no matter how big or small, to just kind of say to yourself, you've already done that, so don't worry about whatever the next thing is that you want to do, because you've already done all of these things previously, so you can do whatever it is that you want to do. Just go out there and give it a try, and remember how you've come along, where you've come from, basically.
I love how you said that because there's the keepsakes that are like objects, but then you're able to keep the keepsakes internally as well. And then if you were in wrapping up this conversation, the younger bookworm version of you as a child, hey, I love books.
Oh, I'm still a bookworm.
Well, yeah,
Don't
okay,
get
so
me
that so
wrong.
you and yeah, so that never changed. But that younger self, if you were to put your younger self with who you are now, what do you think if both of you are in the same room and you had a conversation? What would that be like? I know I'm throwing something out there that would never feasibly happen, but there are two versions of you. I feel like it would be a really neat conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that always kind of crops up, doesn't it? What would you say to your younger self, and all this kind of thing. Yeah, I think my younger self, if she could see this now, she would be relieved, probably, because of the fact that she was probably at that point when she was kind of thinking, how is any of this going to work out? As we all do at that age. But I think I think from my perspective now, if I was talking to my younger self, I would just say, don't worry about it. Like, you're going to make those mistakes that you made, or, you're going to have those stresses and whatever. There's nothing you can do about it because that's just life. And it's not a bad thing either. All those things that happened that maybe you got super upset about or regretted or, anything like that, you learn from every single one of them, and you have to take that on board. I spent a lot of time when I was younger trying to be a perfectionist because I think that's a huge portion of what we have today, unfortunately, is perfectionism has always been kind of driven into us to some extent. But I think the most important thing for me was realizing that there is no such thing as perfect, and to be able to actually embrace that and to kind of go with that is kind of the biggest difference, I think, between what would be my younger self and myself that I am now. So I think I think if I was sitting here right now with my younger self, she'd be laughing at me for that, because she'd be looking around my flat and going, "But I can't see anything here that's messy and that's out of order." I'd be like, yeah, but let's look past the let's look past that, the material, and think more about just you know the emotional and how you handle life anyway, and everything that kind of comes at you. Yeah, everything might look like it's in place, but is it really, and does it matter if it isn't at the end of the day? And I think that's the major difference between the self that's now and the younger self. And the younger self would also be looking at the number of books that I have and would be going, seriously, like, how are you actually going to read any of those?
Some point
But
you
yeah,
with all the traveling that you do, and you said it, like perfectionism is glorified, but it's not
yeah,
a goal that is realistic, that is tangible, that is easily attained. But what is, and I love what you said because I am trying to go into that direction as well, is that what you have gotten to see is how a compassion and a loving kindness that can trump all, like whatever perfectionistic tendencies that we all have in certain ways. If we're nicer to ourselves, then that's really what matters. And then
yeah,
everything around us just radiates and shines. And clearly with your team and in your community that you've built up, it's showing. And to be able to have you on to share that story. Obviously, we talked a little bit about tennis, but this is what I love, Chloe, is that we kind of got underneath the surface of you in a way that I hope and I feel like was very memorable for people to see all different layers of who you are. And I'm so thankful for this in-depth and candid conversation. Thanks so much for being a part of this.
thank you so very much for having me. Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for your time.